The frostbound courier. Jace Merrick cursed as his snowcruiser's engine sputtered against the howling Arctic gale. The temperature gauge flashed an angry red, a warning he couldn't afford to ignore much longer. 3 days into the frozen wastelands of Nova Polaris, and he was no closer to the Arcturus research outpost. Should have demanded triple payment, he muttered, adjusting the thermal controls on his protective suit. Should have demanded a damn escort. The mission had seemed straightforward enough: deliver medical supplies to an isolated research facility before their winter stockpile ran out. What the briefing hadn't mentioned was the electrical storm that would disable his navigation system or the pack of frost wolves that had chased him off the established route. A loud crack from beneath the cruiser made Jace's heart sink. The reinforced chassis, supposedly designed for these extreme conditions, was surrendering to the unforgiving terrain. He throttled down, scanning the barren white landscape for any sign of shelter. The horizon offered nothing but endless white dunes and jagged ice formations. The cruiser lurched suddenly, tipping precariously as the ground beneath the right treads gave way. Jace barely had time to secure the medical container before the vehicle slid sideways into a concealed crevasse, coming to rest at a 40-degree angle against a wall of blue ice. "Perfect," he growled, checking the integrity of his environmental suit. The cruiser wouldn't move again without substantial repairs, and nightfall would bring temperatures no human could survive without shelter. The supply container, thankfully, remained intact, small comfort if he froze to death before delivering it. Jace gathered his emergency pack and the precious cargo, then squeezed through the cruiser's tilted hatch. The wind hit him like a physical blow, tiny ice crystals stinging any exposed skin. His helmet's visor immediately began to frost over as he scanned his surroundings. Movement caught his eye, a flicker of something darker against the endless white. He reached instinctively for the pulse pistol at his hip, his reflexes honed by years of navigating the dangerous frontiers between settlements. The figure materialized from the swirling snow as if part of the storm itself. Tall and lithe, clad in form-fitting ivory furs that seemed to shift with the landscape. The stranger's face was partially covered by a bone-white mask adorned with intricate carvings, revealing only piercing silver eyes that studied him with unmistakable wariness. Jace kept his hands visible but remained alert. "I come in peace," he called, his voice carrying in the momentary lull between wind gusts. "My transport's damaged. I'm delivering medical supplies to Arcturus outpost." The figure tilted their head slightly, then reached up to remove the mask. Jace found himself looking at a woman with skin the color of pale blue ice and white hair pulled back in elaborate braids interwoven with small crystals. Her features were sharp, almost severe, but undeniably beautiful in their alienness. "Outlanders," she said, the word carrying a hint of disdain. "Always crashing where you don't belong." Her accent was strange, melodic yet crisp, like the sound of ice cracking on a still morning. "Not by choice," Jace replied, gesturing to his stranded cruiser. "I need to reach the outpost. People will die without these supplies." "The outpost is 3 days' journey through the shattered plains," she said, her silver eyes assessing him coldly. "You wouldn't survive the night alone." A howl echoed across the wasteland, the unmistakable call of a frost wolf. Not the ordinary kind found near settlements, but the larger, more intelligent variety that ruled these remote regions. The woman's expression hardened. "The glacial pack has your scent," she said. "They've been tracking you since you entered their territory." "And you've been tracking them?" Jace asked, suddenly understanding her presence. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I am Talia Frost, huntress of the Rimwalker clan. No outsider crosses our territory without my knowledge." Another howl sounded, closer this time. Talia's eyes narrowed. "The pack approaches. If you wish to live, you'll follow me now." She turned without waiting for a response, moving with fluid grace across the snow that seemed to barely register her weight. Jace hesitated only a moment before shouldering his pack and the medical container, trudging after her with considerably less elegance. They traveled in silence for nearly an hour, the wind mercifully dropping as they entered a region of towering ice formations that resembled ancient ruins. Jace struggled to keep pace, the medical container growing heavier with each step. Just as his legs began to tremble with exhaustion, Talia stopped before what appeared to be a solid wall of ice. She pressed her gloved hand against the surface in a specific pattern, and a section of the wall slid aside, revealing a hidden entrance. "Quickly," she commanded. Inside, the difference was immediate. The howling wind became a distant moan, and a soft blue-green light emanated from crystalline formations embedded in the walls. The temperature, while still cold, was manageable. "You can remove your helmet," Talia said, shrugging off her outer layer of furs to reveal a sleek, functional outfit beneath. "This place is sealed from the storm." As Jace complied, he took in his surroundings. The ice cave was clearly a temporary shelter rather than a permanent dwelling, but it bore signs of regular use: storage niches carved into the walls, a central fire pit with strange blue flames that gave off heat without smoke, and various tools and weapons organized with meticulous care. "Thank you," he said, setting down the medical container with relief. "I wouldn't have survived out there." Talia regarded him with cool detachment. "Why does your outpost need these supplies so urgently?" "The winter stockpile should last until the thaw." "Outbreak of frost fever," Jace explained. "Started in the outer habitats and spread to the central dome. They've lost 12 people already, including their chief medic." Something flickered across Talia's face: surprise, perhaps, or concern. "Frost fever doesn't affect Outlanders. It's a condition of the native population." Jace nodded. "Exactly why they weren't prepared. The outpost has been accepting native refugees from the southern territories. The disease spread from them to the human population, mutating in the process." Talia's expression hardened. "The sundered clans. They fled north after the Phantasm Raiders destroyed their ancestral grounds." She turned away, busying herself with stoking the strange blue fire. "And now they bring disease to your people as well as mine. These medicines will help both populations," Jace said, patting the container. "If I can deliver them in time." Talia was silent for a long moment, her back still turned to him. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. "I will guide you to the outpost. The journey is treacherous, and the glacial pack will not abandon their hunt easily. But I know paths through the shattered plains that even they fear to tread." "Why help me?" Jace asked, surprised by her change of heart. She turned to face him, her silver eyes reflecting the blue flames. "Because despite what you Outlanders believe, we do not rejoice in suffering, even yours." Her lips curved in a small, sardonic smile. "Besides, you'd never make it alone, and I've spent too much energy saving you to waste it now." As night fell outside the shelter, the howls of the frost wolves grew closer. Talia explained they would need to wait until dawn before attempting to travel. The pack was too active after dark, and even she wouldn't risk an encounter in the darkness. They shared a meal of dried meat and some kind of preserved fruit that Talia produced from her supplies. The food was unfamiliar but revitalizing, spreading warmth through Jace's body. "Tell me about your people," he said as they sat across from each other by the blue fire. "I've transported goods across half this planet, but I've never met anyone like you." Talia studied him, seemingly weighing how much to share. "The Rimwalkers have lived on Nova Polaris for 20 generations. We were the first to adapt to the Great Frost, when the climate shifted and the endless winter began." "How do you survive out here?" he asked, genuinely curious. "The conditions are brutal even with the best technology." "We don't fight the ice," she said simply. "We learn to become part of it." She extended her hand, palm up. Before Jace's astonished eyes, a small whirlwind of ice crystals formed above her skin, dancing and spinning before coalescing into a perfect miniature sculpture of a frost wolf. "Your people are telekinetic?" he asked, amazed. "No," she replied, closing her hand and dissolving the sculpture. "We're connected to the essence of this world. Your scientists would call it manipulation of molecular structures, but to us, it's the frost song, the communication between our bodies and the ice that surrounds us. Their conversation continued late into the night, barriers slowly lowering as they shared stories of their respective worlds. Jace spoke of the crowded orbital habitats where he was raised, the countless transport missions that had taken him across the settled regions of Nova Polaris, and the family he'd left behind on the central colonies. In turn, Talia revealed glimpses of Rimwalker culture, their seasonal migrations following the patterns of the ice, their deep spiritual connection to the planet, and their ongoing conflicts with both the Phantasm Raiders and the expanding outposter settlements. When they finally settled to sleep on opposite sides of the shelter, Jace found himself staring at the crystalline ceiling, his mind racing with new perspectives. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, the dangerous journey across the shattered plains, the continued threat of the frost wolves, and the urgency of his mission. But for now, in this moment of temporary sanctuary, he felt a strange sense of discovery. In this harshest of environments, he'd found not just a guide but perhaps something more, a bridge between two worlds that had remained separate for too long. Outside, the wolves howled their hunger into the endless night, but within the ice shelter, something new and unexpected had begun to form, a fragile trust that might just survive the cruel landscape that had brought them together. Thawing boundaries. Dawn broke over the shattered plains in shades of violet and silver. Jace checked the seals on his environmental suit while Talia stood at the entrance of their ice shelter, scanning the landscape for signs of danger. The frost wolves had moved on, their tracks leading north, but that provided only momentary relief. "We need to move quickly," Talia said, securing her bone-white mask. "The glacial pack will circle back when they realize they've lost our trail." Jace shouldered the medical container, its weight a constant reminder of his mission's urgency. "Lead the way." They set out across terrain that seemed designed to kill. What had appeared from a distance as merely undulating snow fields revealed themselves as treacherous arrays of ice spikes and hidden crevasses. Twice Jace nearly plunged to his death before Talia's quick reflexes saved him, her hand grasping his suit with surprising strength. "How do you know where to step?" he asked after a particularly close call. Talia pointed to subtle color variations in the snow, nearly imperceptible to his untrained eye. "The frost psalm warns us. Listen with your feet, not your ears." By midday, they reached the edge of what Talia called the glass forest, towering formations of ice that resembled colossal trees, their translucent surfaces refracting sunlight into prismatic patterns across the snow. Beautiful, but deadly, razor-sharp edges that could slice through protective gear with the slightest contact. "Stay exactly in my footsteps," Talia warned. "The paths shift daily, but certain routes remain safer." As they navigated the crystal maze, Jace noticed a change in Talia's demeanor, a growing tension in her shoulders, her silver eyes constantly scanning the crystalline canopy above. "What is it?" he asked quietly. "We're being watched," she replied without turning. "Not wolves. Something else." No sooner had she spoken than a shadow detached itself from one of the ice formations ahead, humanoid but wrong somehow, its proportions elongated and movements too fluid for a normal skeletal structure. Its skin was mottled gray, reflecting the ice around it like a living mirror. "Phantasm Scout," Talia hissed, drawing a blade from her belt. The metal gleamed with an unnatural blue sheen. They'd ventured farther north than ever before. The creature tilted its head, studying them with eyes that seemed to shift color like oil on water. Then it opened what passed for a mouth and emitted a high-pitched keening that made Jace wince in pain. "It's calling others," Talia said grimly. "We need to move. Now." They abandoned stealth for speed, racing through the glass forest as more shadows appeared among the ice formations. Jace's lungs burned with the effort of keeping pace while carrying the medical container, but fear of what pursued them drove him forward. They burst from the forest into a vast open expanse, the frozen sea, Talia called it, where ancient waves had been caught mid-motion by some catastrophic flash freeze millennia ago. Here, at least, they could see what pursued them, a dozen phantasm raiders flowing over the ice with inhuman grace. "They're hurting us," Talia realized aloud. "Driving us northeast." Away from the outpost. No, her voice tightened. Directly toward it. They're using us to locate it. Understanding dawned grimly. They don't know exactly where it is. But they know you're heading there with critical supplies, Talia finished. The perfect tracker. Before they could change course, a new sound cut through the thin air, the mechanical whine of engines. 3 sleek vehicles crested a nearby wave of frozen sea, their weapons already deploying. Outpost patrol. Jace exclaimed with relief. The patrol engaged the phantasms immediately, energy weapons cutting through the frigid air. The raiders scattered, their ambush disrupted, but not before one launched something toward Talia, a crystalline projectile that shattered against her shoulder. She gasped, dropping to one knee as frost began spreading rapidly from the impact point. Jace reached her just as the patrol vehicles surrounded them in a protective formation. "She's hit," he shouted to the armored figures disembarking. A tall woman in commander's insignia approached, her faceplate retracting to reveal dark skin and eyes that widened at the sight of Talia. "You brought a rimwalker to our doorstep," her tone mixed disbelief with suspicion. "She saved my life," Jace replied curtly. "And now she needs medical attention. The supplies too, they're intact." "Get them both inside," the commander ordered after a moment's hesitation. "Phantasms will return with reinforcements." The Arcturus research outpost rose from the ice like a metallic mushroom, central dome surrounded by smaller habitat structures, the entire complex perched atop massive struts that prevented snow accumulation around its base. Under different circumstances, Jace would have appreciated the engineering marvel. Now, he could focus only on Talia's increasingly labored breathing as the frost spread from her shoulder toward her neck. Inside the medical bay, chaos reigned. Makeshift beds lined the walls, each occupied by patients in various stages of frost fever. Medical staff moved between them with the sluggish movements of people pushed beyond exhaustion. Director Orion, the commander called, and a harried-looking man with silver hair and a close-cropped beard hurried over. "The supplies?" he asked immediately. "Here," Jace said, presenting the container. "But my guide needs help, phantasm weapon." Director Orion's expression shifted from relief to grave concern as he examined Talia. "Crystalline neurotoxin. Get her to isolation room 3, he ordered the medical team. And prepare the neutralizing agent." As they wheeled Talia away, Jace made to follow but was stopped by the commander's firm hand on his shoulder. "Debriefing first, courier. Standard protocol." "Commander Vega," the director interjected, "this man just completed a mission with a casualty rate over 70%. Perhaps the debriefing can wait until we've stabilized both our new patients and started distributing the medication." Commander Vega relented with visible reluctance. 1 hour. Then I want a full report." Jace spent that hour helping unpack and distribute the medical supplies, his technical knowledge proving useful in calibrating the delivery systems. All the while, his thoughts returned to the isolation room where Talia fought against the phantasm toxin. When finally permitted to see her, he found her conscious but weak, the spreading frost halted but not yet receding from her pale blue skin. "You made it," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "The medicines?" "Being administered now," he assured her, taking a seat beside her bed. "You're going to be okay." She shook her head slightly. "The toxin is designed specifically for my kind. The raiders have studied us, learned how to target our connection to the frost song." Before Jace could respond, commotion erupted in the corridor outside, raised voices, followed by the distinctive sound of weapons being readied. Director Orion burst into the room, his expression grave. "We have visitors. A delegation from the Rimwalker clan demanding the return of their huntress." Talia struggled to sit up. "My father. The chief tracker would have felt my distress through our clan bond." Outside the outpost's main airlock, 20 Rimwalkers stood in perfect formation, their white furs and bone masks creating an intimidating display against the stark landscape. Their leader, a tall figure with elaborate crystal decorations woven into his white braids, stepped forward as Jace and Director Orion emerged. "I am Davion Frost, Chief Tracker of the Rimwalker clan," he announced, his voice resonating with authority. "You hold my daughter within your walls." "She's recovering from a phantasm attack," Director Orion explained. "Our medicines are helping her." Davion's silver eyes, so like Talia's, narrowed. "The same medicines you refused to share with our southern kinsmen when frost fever first appeared among them?" The accusation hung in the frigid air. Director Orion had the grace to look uncomfortable. Resources were limited. Difficult decisions had to be made. "And now the disease has mutated, affecting your people as well," Davion observed coldly. "Perhaps the ice itself seeks balance." The tense standoff might have deteriorated further had Talia not appeared, leaning heavily on Jace for support despite the medical staff's objections to her leaving her bed. "Father," she called. "The Outlanders are not our enemies today. The phantasms have returned in greater numbers, pushing northward into our territories." Davion's stern expression softened slightly at the sight of his daughter. "The raiders grow bolder. 3 settlements lost in the southern reaches already. They followed us here," Jace added. "They were using us to locate the outpost." "Which means they'll return with greater force," Commander Vega said, joining the group. "Our defensive systems are designed for environmental threats, not coordinated attacks." A chilling howl cut through the conversation, not the familiar cry of frost wolves, but something more alien, more threatening. In the distance, dark shapes moved across the white landscape with unnatural speed. "They're here," Talia said unnecessarily. What followed was a hasty council of war inside the outpost's command center. Ancient prejudices were temporarily set aside in the face of common destruction. Director Orion shared the outpost's resources and layout, while Davion revealed his clan's knowledge of phantasm weaknesses and tactics. "Their physiology allows them to mimic surrounding materials," the chief tracker explained, "but the process requires tremendous energy. Rapid temperature changes disrupt their molecular cohesion." "The thermal regulation systems," Jace suggested. "We could modify them to create alternating hot and cold zones around the perimeter." Commander Vega looked skeptical. "That would drain our power reserves in hours." "We can supplement with frost song," Talia said, stronger now as the antitoxin took effect. "My hunters can intensify the cold between your heat pulses. The contrast will be greater than anything the raiders can adapt to quickly." The planning continued through the night as phantasm forces gathered on the horizon. By dawn, an unprecedented alliance had formed, outpost scientists working alongside Rimwalker hunters, combining technology and ancient knowledge in desperate innovation. Jace found himself at the center of this collaboration, his experience with various technologies making him the perfect translator between the two groups. More surprisingly, he discovered that his connection with Talia gave him credibility with the Rimwalkers that no Outlander had previously enjoyed. As preparations neared completion and the phantasm forces began their approach, Talia found Jace on the observation deck, surveying the battlefield to be. "My father approves of you," she said, standing beside him. "He believes you have ice in your soul despite your Outlander blood." "High praise," Jace replied with a small smile. "Does that mean he won't object when I ask to visit Rimwalker territory again?" Talia turned to face him, her silver eyes searching his. "You would want to return? After your mission is complete?" "My contract was to deliver the supplies," he said. "Nothing says I have to leave immediately afterward." Something softened in her expression. "The path between our worlds has always been treacherous. Perhaps more dangerous than the shattered plains we crossed together. Good thing I have an excellent guide," he said, reaching for her hand. Outside, the first wave of phantasms breached the outer sensor perimeter. Alarms sounded throughout the outpost as defenders moved to their positions. The battle for Arcturus, and perhaps for the future of coexistence on Nova Polaris, was about to begin. Talia's fingers intertwined with his, cool against his warm skin. "Ready?" she asked. Jace nodded, thinking of how far they'd come in such a short time, from suspicion to trust, from cultural divide to personal connection. Whatever the outcome of today's battle, something fundamental had changed between their peoples, a thawing of boundaries long frozen by fear and misunderstanding. Ready, he confirmed, and together they turned to face the approaching storm, no longer separated by the differences that had once defined them, but united by the bonds they had forged across the icy divide.